Hi all, good morning, good afternoon, and even good middle of the night to some of you across the Atlantic. Welcome to our webinar on the newest functionality in the latest release of Dime.Scheduler. Today, Tom is going to walk us through the new configurations for resource-specific calendars, show us the new capacity pivot grid that will allow slicing and dicing in your resources availability and their load, and also take a deep dive in the additional features on working with pins on the map. He will also show us some small operational enhancements on the controls that will make a planner's life a lot easier. We have a huge number of attendees today in this session, so all of you will be muted throughout the entire presentation just to make it manageable for ourselves. But you can obviously submit your questions in the dedicated questions box in the webinar controls. Please make sure to submit them in that specific section and not in the overall chat box, please. We'll come back to answer your questions at the end of the session, so after the live demo. If in the unlikely event that we wouldn't have time and would not be able to answer your questions within the time frame of the session, then obviously we will come back to you personally with a follow-up call or a follow-up email. So thank you all for your attention today. And with that, I'm passing the ball to my colleague, Tom.
Thank you very much, Nico, for this brief introduction. And of course, good morning also from my side to everybody logged into this webinar. Thanks a lot for taking the time to have a look at our exciting new features. During our last upgrade webinar in September, we had a detailed look at our new project planning, which was new at that time. And in the meanwhile, new features have been released every month, so that results in a lot of things I would like to show you today. Since most of you know the product and work with it on a daily basis, this webinar will not cover the base features of Dime.Scheduler, but we will focus on the new stuff so you can bring the new features to your customers as soon as possible. If you would like to learn more about the base features of Dime.Scheduler, please feel free to subscribe to one of our demo webinars. So let's jump to our demo environment. And the first new feature which I would like to cover are resource calendars. The introduction of these resource calendars cover basically two things. First of all, the visualization of the calendar in the plan board. So that means that the planner will be able to see when a resource is available, or even more important, is not available. And the second thing is the automatic recalculation of appointment duration based on the resource's non-working time. So that means if you will drag an appointment over a non-working time slot, the duration of that appointment will change with the duration, or will be extended with the duration of the non-working time. Both of the features can work together or apart from each other. So you could basically visualize the resource calendar without actually recalculating the appointments, or the other way around. So let's jump to the application administration and enable both features in this case. So we will visualize the resource calendars. You can do this in the planning tab. And we will also switch on the calendar mode, which will take care of the recalculation of the appointments. You could also choose the color, which will be shown in the plan board for the non-working time. So let's save these features. And when we navigate back to the plan board in a couple of minutes, you will see that then the non-working time will be colored. Of course, before we can do that, we need some calendars. And let's move to the calendar setup screen. This is a screen that we showed you already during our last webinar with the introduction of the Gantt chart. So basically the same calendars will be used in both the Gantt chart and your resource planning, so in the planning board. Out of the box, you will get one default company calendar. This is the default calendar. That means that this calendar will be assigned to all resources which have no specific calendar assigned during a given period. And let's have a look at the different features or the different configurations that we can do within such a calendar. So first of all, we can set the weekend days. In this case, that's Saturday and Sunday. But we could also mark the weekend days as working days in case of weekend shifts. Then we have the business hours. So in this case, for the demo, we will work from 8 till 12 and 1 till 5. That means we have a 1 hour of lunch break for our resources. Except on Fridays, because there we defined an override, a weekday override. For Fridays, we only work from 8 till 12. So with the weekday overrides, you could specify a recurring event every week on a specific day, where you could say we don't work on that specific day, or we have altered business hours on that day. And then furthermore, we have two things left here, the day overrides and the week overrides. The day overrides are date-specific events like public holidays, for example. Let's just insert one next Monday on the 1st of April. We all know what day that is. That's the April Fool's Day. So let's just type that in. Maybe I should type that correctly. April Fool's. There we go. And if we edit that, we again can choose between a non-working time or a working time. So we will make sure this is a public holiday, so we make it non-working time. The week overrides, I will not cover them today. Basically, they do the same thing as the day overrides. That difference that the week overrides will span a period of time. For example, if you say the second week of April, the company is closed, you could then create a week override instead of creating day overrides per business day. Okay, so we set up our calendar, our base calendar. As you can see here, we also have other calendars which we will use during this demo. We have an early shift calendar. As you can see, it inherits from the company calendar. That's very important to mention here, because in that case, it will inherit all the overrides and settings that you've done on the company calendar will be inherited on this early shift calendar, except if you override them. So in this case, the business hours for our early shift is 6 till 2 o'clock in the afternoon. On Friday, we also have some altered business hours here, 6 till 10, but we don't have a day override. So that means it will take over the day overrides of the company calendar. So the 1st of April will also be a holiday in the case of this calendar. And you can make multiple combinations. You can inherit on multiple levels with these calendars. So it's a very flexible setup. So let's move back to the planning board and let's refresh the planning board, because of course we activated this new functionality. We created some calendars, or we changed some calendars. So we want to see that result now in the planning board. So in a couple of seconds, you will see when the plan board is loaded that you now have these colored time slots, which were not there before at the start of this demo. So you can see for every working day, we have a lunch break of 1 hour. You can see the night times here, and of course the 1st of April, which we defined as a public holiday. I can still go here and visualize the night times, which I have hidden for the purpose of this demo. So you can see here that now the complete night time is also colored in green. So let's just put them back here, and let's put them at 6 o'clock in the evening and 7 o'clock in the morning, like this. Okay, now that's for the visualization. So you can see we can have a flexible setup there to visualize the calendars. Now we want to have a look at the recalculation of the appointments. And in order to do that, let's just start by going to our back office application, which is Business Central in this case. And I would like to create a new service order. We will plan that, and then you will see what the behavior will be in Dime.Scheduler. So let's open the list of service orders in Business Central here. We will create a new service order. And let's say this is a repair for our customer 20,000. I will assign a service order type, so it's service. And we will assign a service item, so the item that needs to be serviced. So at this point, the order is ready in Business Central. We can now send it over to Dime.Scheduler by hitting this button, and we have the order 196. So let's close that. Let's close the order. Close the order list, and I will also close the menu again, so then we can see a bit more what's happening on the screen. So immediately the order was sent to Dime.Scheduler. As you can see here, the order appears in the list, which is grouped by customer name. In this case, you can see the order here. If I will select it, you will see that the address appears on the map immediately, that the task details are loaded immediately, so nothing really changed in that area. The basics are still there. Okay, so now I would like to select a resource which is best suited to do this job. So by clicking this button here, I will filter out my resources based on their region, based on their skills, so if they can actually do the work that needs to be done. And I would like to plan it next week on the 2nd of April, since the 1st of April is a public holiday. Let's also show the business hours here. That makes it a bit easier to follow during the demo. Okay, so now we would like to plan this order. So if I drag and drop this order to the plan board at 8 o'clock, for example, you can see that the duration of the task or the order is 2 hours, and that nothing happens because we didn't plan it during a non-working time. If I would now move this order to 11 o'clock, you will see that it will span 1 hour of non-working time and that the order is automatically extended. So if I would hover now over the appointment, you can see the total duration here in the tooltip is 3 hours, but the working time, and let me hover over it again, is 2 hours, as you can see at the bottom of this tooltip. So the non-working time is subtracted from the total duration of the appointment. Also, when sending back the data to the back office system, and let's navigate to the service order, the data is immediately stored here on the service order. You can see here that the allocated hours is 2 hours and not 3 hours. So we also sent the non-working time together with the data to the back office system. And what we did here is just subtracted it from the total duration. But if you would like to do something else with that, that's not a problem. You will have the figures and you can basically execute any logic you want with that data. So let's close the order again. Okay, let's now have a look at the 2-day view. So I want Tuesday and Wednesday in my view. I have my appointment here and I would like to schedule that appointment here at 4 o'clock in the evening. What will happen now, since it spans 2 hours, you will see that it will now jump over the night, let's say, expand the duration of the appointment with a large number of hours. In this case, the total duration is now 17 hours, but as you can see, the working time is still 2 hours. As a planner, you don't want this because that means that your resource would need to go to the customer on Tuesday and then need to go back in the morning on Wednesday. So that doesn't make sense. What you rather would do is let the work finish on Tuesday with, for example, overtime for the resource. In that case, there are a couple of ways of bypassing the calendar logic of Dime.Scheduler. The first option, you saw that already, is in the application level. Of course, that's not what we want to do here. We still want to keep it for other appointments. So we will need to do it on appointment level. And that can be done by just right-clicking on the appointment. A new menu was added here, the toggle calendar mode. If you click that, the appointment will recalculate, as you can see. We now have an appointment of 2 hours with an actual working time of 2 hours. And you have also this visual orange indicator here, which will show that for this appointment, currently the calendar is bypassed. If you double click on the appointment, you will also have a new button here, which does exactly the same thing. So I can now activate the calendar again, save, and you will see that it will be recalculated again based on the non-working time. A third option is to do it per plan board. You could say, I'm planning a bunch of tasks. I don't want the calendar to be applied to my tasks. So then you could here ignore the calendar with this button. If I now double click on the appointment and would just save it without changing anything, it will recalculate. And you will see again, we will have an appointment that is taking 2 hours with 2 hours of working time. So these are the different ways on how you can bypass calendars. You could also do it also on task level already. When you send over the task from your back office system, you could also define or already define that a calendar should be bypassed. So you can choose that already from your back office application. So let's move this appointment here and let's disable the ignore calendars, and I will also remove the resource filters which I had here in my view. Okay, now what will happen if resources have different calendars? Because in this case, everybody is using the default company calendar. So we have added another setup screen, resource calendars, which I will open here in the second tab, where we can now say that we want to assign the, for example, early shift calendar, which we saw earlier in the calendar setup screen. We will assign that for our resource Linda, for example, Linda. And I would like to assign this resource from the 1st of March, or this calendar to this resource from the 1st of March to, let's say, the end of April, and save that. What I could do now is insert a second line and say for Linda, I will assign the company calendar again from the 1st of May till the end of May, etc., etc. So you could build a whole strategy here with all the calendars that you want to show on the planning boards. If I now navigate back to the planning board, refresh the planning board, you will see that for Linda, you can see that already here while the appointments are loading, that for Linda, now the visualization changed. So we have now a working time, and let me select the whole week maybe, that's a bit easier to see it. So you can see on Monday, there's a holiday because it inherits from the company calendar. And then the rest of the week, Linda is working from 6 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon. Now, what will happen if we want to plan 2 resources on appointments, but if they have different calendars? So let's move this appointment here. That's the appointment we were working on earlier. And now I would like to add a resource to this appointment, but I will add Linda. who has another calendar than the current resource, Mary. So let me just add this resource to the appointment. And then you can see you get prompted to resolve the conflict, because there is a conflict. You have two different calendars. There are three things you can do. You can just cancel the operation. If you cancel it, you just go back and no resource gets added. Let's not do that. So let's add it again. You can ignore the calendars. That's exactly the same thing as we did before. That means we are going to add a resource, but the calendars will be totally ignored. Or we could choose a leading resource. For example, in this case, let's pick Mary and confirm. So now there will be no recalculation, because for Mary there is no non-working time. For Linda there is non-working time, but we chose to use the calendar of Mary in order to recalculate the appointment. So that's the way how we deal with conflicting calendars in this new feature. And that's the first thing I wanted to show you today, so the resource calendars. The second nice new feature that we built is, as Nico said already in the opening, is the capacity pivot. And that will give you a helicopter view of your resources capacity and your resources load. And you can slice and dice the data basically to your needs. So let's add it to our screen here. So we will add the capacity pivot here. I will just maximize it a bit so you can have a look on how it looks like. Of course, now you don't see that much because we still need to load the data. So let's load the data for our capacity pivot. And let's have a look at what you see here. So on the left axis, the vertical axis, you see your resource types, which I can expand where you have your resources individually. On the horizontal axis, you will see your date information. So in this case, the week, and underneath the week, you will see the different days where planning exists. You can see that Monday is not included in here, although it was selected in our calendar, because there is no capacity on Monday and there is no planning on Monday. So in that case, it will not be shown into the pivots because it is a holiday. Let's have a look also at the values that we see here. So as you can see, we have three columns. We have the actual value. The actual is taken directly from the plan board. So that's based on your planned data and will also affect this pivot. If you change the planning, it will affect this pivot immediately. So the actual data, so let's say for this resource, Linda, she's planned for 6 hours on Tuesday, the 2nd of April. Then we have the capacity, which is coming from the back office application in this case. So the capacity was created in Business Central and then sent over to Dime.Scheduler. And then we have the loads, which is the capacity measured against the actuals. So in that case, this is 100%. Why? Because we have 8 hours planned, we have an 8-hour capacity. In the case of Linda, you can see here, we still have some capacity left, so there's a load of 75%. There's actually a fourth value which we can add, which is not by default added. That's the variance. So if we would drag and drop the variance here to the values section in the configuration panel, you will see also the variance gets added. So let me just expand this one again. And then you will see that the variance is basically the difference between the capacity and the actual. So in this case, you can see you have a lot of capacity left to plan something. But you can see also some cells marked in red. That means that there is an overplanning, or in this case, that there is no capacity, as you can see here. So we didn't set up capacity for our rooms and our vehicles because we're not interested in that. That means that I also don't want to see those in my report here. And then you can start, as we said, slicing and dicing and filtering the data as you want it. So what I will do here is in my resource types, I will put a label filter, which equals technical. So I only want to see my resources of the type technical, which will be filtered out here. I want to expand all the rows. I want to expand all the columns like this. So then you have a clear view on your capacity. You can see that there are a lot of other fields here in this list. These are all fields related to, first of all, the resource, which you can add to the row labels or the column labels. So if you say, I want to see my capacity per department, per team, per region, whatever, as long as you have the data, you can just drag and drop that field to the row labels, and then the capacity pivot will be updated. Next, you also have the values, as we told, so actual capacity, load, and variance, which can be dragged to the values section. And then we also have the date related field. So if you say, I don't want to see it per week, but I would like to see it more per month, for example, and then per day, or maybe you don't want to see the day level, you could move also the day away. So let's say we want to load our capacity now for March and April. like this, you will see that the capacity will load, and then you get the capacity for every day. You could close the columns, so then you get the overview of the capacity per month. You could add totals, grand totals or subtotals per column and per row. So that's how you would like to see it. You could add the totals at the beginning of the grid, at the end of the grids, at the beginning of the rows, at the end of the rows. So all the flexibility is also available here. Okay, so let's erase the date range and let's open these calendars again. So let's minimize our capacity pivot and let's move it here underneath the planning board. Let's put it there, and our planning board is here. I just want to show you the consequences of changing something in the plan board and what's happening in the capacity pivot. So let's look for a resource that has no capacity, Mr. Ross Geller. So let's have a look here. We have Mr. Ross Geller, and let's make an appointment for him. Pivot. You will see that the appointment will be recalculated because, again, there is 1 hour of non-working time in which I created the appointment. So you can see I have an appointment of 6 hours with 5 hours of working time. If I would now refresh the capacity pivot, you will see that Mr. Geller now has here 5 hours planned on the 8 hours of capacity, which is a load of 62.5%. If I would now, just to exaggerate, copy and paste the same appointment again and look at the effect here, then you will see immediately for Ross Geller that there is an over planning, and you can see that they are marked in red automatically. So there's a 125% of load, which shouldn't be possible. We overplanned this resource with 2 hours in this case. So this gives you a very nice overview, and you can go back to your planning afterwards to actually solve the problems. Hit refresh here, and you will see then if all the conflicts are solved or not. Maybe just one other detail. If I would close my columns again and you see the month overview, and you would like to say, okay, for this Mr. Geller here, I have a load of 50%. Watch the detail of that 50%. You could just double click on the resource, and you will see here that for every day you will have a line per resource. You will have a line with the actual, the capacity, and the load and the variance of that resource. So I will just, in the meantime, refresh this one so we can continue with a clean profile later on. And let's go to another session, which I logged in up front of this demo. This is another user in the same Dime.Scheduler instance. What will be happening here? This user will be planning in a Gantt chart. And we want to have a look at the effect of planning in the Gantt chart in the capacity pivot. So let's open a project. Let's just select one here and then click Open Project. And you will see that the Gantt chart gets loaded automatically. We already prepared the planning of the project in time, but we didn't assign any resources to it yet. Now you, of course, want to see here, I have to plan this excavation of the soil. I need to plan it in April. You need to check if there is capacity in April to do that. In this case, I have my pivot already set up here. You could filter out your resources here based on, again, their skills, their region, or whatever you would like to filter on. And that would also filter out the capacity pivot. So if you say, I need somebody with skills to excavate soil, you would automatically filter out here the capacity pivot. So let's add a resource here. Let's see. In this case, it's very easy because we don't have any load. So let's take our resource, our beloved Jack Daniels, and add him to the planning. And then let's synchronize this planning. So in this case, what will happen now is that the planning will be filled for this resource Jack Daniels based on his calendar, on the same calendar as we saw in the plan board. So if you're now going to refresh the capacity pivot, you can see immediately here that we now have a load for that resource during that time period. In this case, I have 8 hours left in the week 14. That's the first week of April. That is correct because this task is starting the 3rd of April. That means the 2nd of April, this resource is not planned, which is 1 day of capacity left. In this week, he's planned completely. And also here, we have 4 hours left for this resource. So just to show you the immediate influence of the Gantt chart on the capacity. If you would now say, no, I don't want to do it, I will move it in time, synchronize it again, you will see that also the capacity will automatically move along. So just to show you briefly, I don't want to go too much in detail into the Gantt chart today, just to show you briefly the effect of the Gantt chart on the capacity. Okay. Good. And then another thing I would like to talk about is the map, because we added quite some new features to the map. So let's just make the workspace a bit bigger here so we can actually see what we're doing. As you have been using the map probably already in the past, you will see that a couple of new fields were added to the map. One of the new fields is this one here. If I click it, nothing will happen now. And this is a new field to execute action URLs on the map. And you know these action URLs already from the plan board. If you, for example, right-click on an appointment or on an empty cell, in this case, we added an action URL, send email. What will this do? This will execute an action in the back office application. In this case, it will send an email, of course. But you could use it for anything you like, as long as you provide the correct logic in your back office application to do so. So we also implemented these action URLs now on the map and on the open task. So if you right click on an open task, you would also be able to add action URLs and execute them. I will come back to that later with an example on how these could be used. Another new button here is this one. This button will allow you to show resource locations or hide them. In the past, we had the actual location of the resource, which could be shown on the map. So the live location based on data that is delivered by, could be multiple devices, could be a black box or a tracer in a vehicle. It could be a mobile app, which is connected to your Business Central instance. If the data is delivered to your back office, we can also forward it to Dime.Scheduler and show the actual position of the resources on the map. With the last release in 2018 September, we also added the home locations to that. So that means that you can geocode the addresses of your resource and show where they live. What we added now is that you can actually switch between both, because that could be pretty important. If you're making a long-term planning, you would like to know where they live, so you can look for orders in the neighborhood of their homes. If you're having an urgent order coming in that needs to be done now, you of course want to know immediately which resource is closest to my customer. So in this case, if we click on home locations, you will see that the home locations of the resources are shown. If you hover over it, you can see the name. So we have this Brenda here. If we switch to actual locations, you will see that Brenda now moved here. So these are the actual locations of the resources. If you don't want to show them, you can just hide them again, whatever you like. The setting will be remembered. So once you click none, it will stay none until you change to another setting. So for example, we are now on the actual location. So if we select an order, you will see the order is shown on the map, and you want to know which resource is closest to this customer. You can just select the 2 pins and see immediately the travel time, which is in this case 32 minutes. But maybe this resource is more qualified to do it. So I can unselect the pin again, select this one, check, okay, this is a 1-hour drive. It's very urgent, so maybe it's better to send this resource over to that customer. So that's a decision you can take at that time. Maybe you noticed already, but when selecting some pins, let me do it again. You will see now there's a small indicator in the pin displaying the sequence of the pin in the route. So 1, 2, 3. So in that order, I selected my pins. That's also something new, but a lot more is new actually, because we added a complete route sequence grid to the application. Let's just show you that with some orders for different customers. So I have 3 orders here, 1, 2, 3. The rest are my resources. I just want to select these orders now and combine them into a trip or a route. I could select them one by one. Another feature that was added is the bulk select feature. By using Ctrl-Shift, I can now just draw a rectangle on the map and the pins will be automatically included into the route. As you can see, the resource pin is not included, and that is the second feature that we added here, is the types and bulk select. If I would enable resources here, it will also be included into the bulk selection. So you can choose which types of pins you want to include into the bulk selection and which type you don't want to include. You could of course select the pin manually. And so as you can see here, we have the route sequence. So all the pins that are selected are displayed here on the right side. Of course, I would like to start from the home location of my resource Mary, so I can drag and drop that to the top. So you can see that the number or the indicators in the pins are changing. So let's say this is not the perfect route, but let's say we want to go from here to here and then 3 and 4. That's perfectly. If you would like to switch these two, you can just drag and drop this one and you will see that the order will change. Also, some fields were added here. In this case, the weight. For example, the resource needs to pick up the broken machines at these customers. So that means that these machines have a weight and the resource is driving a van which have a maximum load. You want to make sure that that the load doesn't exceed the maximum load of the van, of course. So in that case, we also send the weight along with the order when we send it over. Basically, it's just a free decimal field, which we gave a label. As you know, in the application, everything is configurable. But we added a new type of column, which is the running total of this column here. So in case here you have 250, see, this gets 500, 750. So you know if your total load of a van is 1,000 kilograms, you know it's safe to plan this trip. In the future, we will do a lot more with this grid. So we will add travel times. We will make it possible to plan directly from this grid to the plan board. For now, what we can do is use these action URLs. As I said, we can execute an action in the back office application with the data that I've selected here in the order I selected them. I already prepared a second open tasks grid here, which will show my trips. A trip is just a collection of different tasks in a certain order. So what I can do now is by hitting here the action URL button, we created some logic in Business Central. We will create a trip, and you will see that automatically the tasks will be updated and will appear here with a trip number and a trip sequence. And as of that moment, you can start planning them on the plan board because you have the correct sequence now. You can first make some trips, and then afterwards you could just drag and drop them on the plan board. Maybe then one thing I can't forget to mention is that we also added some smaller map configurations here in the user profile. As you can see here, the user can now set the unit of distance, but also the route profile. Route profile means what's the vehicle type my resources are driving. Is it a slow car, a fast car, is it a truck, is it a van, etc., etc. So that's also something the resource can now set up, plus some extra settings here. For example, do I want to see the sequence in my waypoints, yes or no? So these are still available in the application setup, but can be overridden in the user profile. And then I would like to point out some minor changes that we did. Minor changes maybe for us, but maybe for you will make a huge difference for the planner to plan with the application. One of the things is that you can now select multiple tasks. You could already do that in the past, so I could select 2 tasks here, and let's just pick out a day where we want to plan this here, and I will select the day view with the hours. You can now also drag and drop these tasks in one go to the plan board. So you could say, okay, drag and drop, and you will see that the 2 appointments will be planned consecutively. This is very useful in case of, for example, my resource needs to go to a customer. I have 10 tasks to do there. For example, I need to service 10 machines, which takes 15 minutes, half an hour per machine. Then you would, in the past, you need to drag and drop 10 tasks on the plan board. You can now do that in one go. Another way of planning, if I delete those 2 tasks again, I will select them again. You could also do the same, but hold the control key. In that case, the tasks will be planned parallel, so they will start on the same time and end, well, depending on the duration, maybe also end on the same time. Another smaller feature which could be very useful for planners on very popular demand is that we added some shortcut keys to our paste special operations. So we already had the copy paste, the regular Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V. We also added for each of these features a shortcut key with the shift combination, which you can find in the manual. I will not go into too much detail here, but it could be very useful if you need to paste a lot of appointments to different days, that you use the maintain times, for example, that you're sure that every day the appointment will start on the same time. Also in popular demand, we removed the limit here on the page size. So this was limited to 200. You can now show as much as records as you want. So if I want to show 500 records here, this is now possible. Same for the resources. Just take into account that this could have an impact on the load speed of the application and the performance of the application. The more data you load, the more time it will need to load that data, of course. And last but not least is here in the task details section. As you know, when you click on a task or an appointment or anything in the application, it will show all the details here that were sent by your back office application. In the past, we showed all the fields, so that means also the empty fields. But the user, doesn't need those fields since there's no data in there. So we added an option here to hide all the empty fields. So in that case, you can just now show only the important fields that actually have data from the back office application. For example, if I would click on an absence task, you will see there less fields than I would click on an order, because an absence doesn't have a customer number or a customer that is linked to it, for example. So that's an overview of the things we have been working on in the past. There's much more to tell, but our time is a bit limited today. So yeah, I would say just have a look at it, start playing around with it, and we really do hope you like the new features a lot. If we maybe briefly look at the future, because there are other popular requests you have been asking for that we will handle in the coming months, and one of the most popular ones is the recurring appointments. We will start working on that as of now. And we are expecting the recurring appointments the coming months to be released the coming months. So that means that you will be able to plan your appointments according to a certain pattern for a certain time period. For example, every weekday during the next 4 weeks, for example. So that's something we will be working on the coming months. Together with another feature I would like to point out, because also popular demand, we have some filters here where you could say, I want to filter my descriptions based on certain criteria. We will extend these filters as you're used in your Business Central, your back office application in general, where it will also be possible to add some criteria like wildcards, like not equal to, and operators or operators, and all stuff like that. So that's what you can expect, and of course much more in the coming months and the future. So that's it for me. Nico, back to you, and let's see if there are any questions at the moment.
Thanks, Tom, for that. And indeed, we do have a couple of questions from the audience. I'll try to group them here by functional area. Let's start then with the resource calendars. You just thought about the roadmap for recurrency for scheduling appointments. The first question here is also on recurrency, but then on the day overrides. So is it possible to put a recurrency to have an exception, for example, every Wednesday or every Thursday or every Friday? I believe that is what the question was in this case.
Yes, that is actually what I talked about in the beginning. So if you go to the calendar again, let's open it. And let's go to our company calendar. That's what we did with the Friday. So you could set up weekdays, and you can see here the weekday is Friday, but can be any day of the week. So this means that every Friday we will have a schedule which is differing from the standard business hours, or which is a complete non-working day. So we could put in different business hours or change it to non-working time. And that will recur every week, except if you make a day override on that Friday. So for example, if you have altered business hours on Friday, but you have a day override which says, no, this is a public holiday, that's the one that will win the game.
Okay, thanks for that, Tom. So that would be then a weekly override. I think the question goes a little bit further. If it would actually be possible to schedule it in more like an Outlook mode, could we, for example, have an exception every last Friday of the month or every fortnightly Friday than having every weekly Friday?
I would say at the moment there are some possibilities with these week overrides. But I would need to check. I can't answer that actually right now, but it's something we can come back to. If we could actually do it, let's say indeed every last Friday of the month, it's something to check.
Okay, thanks. Another question on the resource calendars. You showed how you can assign a specific resource calendar to one resource, of course. Do I have to do that manually for every single resource in my organization, or could I assign a specific calendar to a resource type, or maybe a group of
Yes, as you saw in the setup screen that I showed you, it's done one by one. It is in our roadmap to expand that screen and to make it possible to create assignments bulk, I would say, per team or per group or whatever. Of course, what you can also do is send these assignments from your back office application. If you have somewhere in Business Central, you know which resource is assigned to which calendar for which period, you could also send it over to Dime.Scheduler.
Okay, so far we covered the questions on the resource calendars. Then we have a couple on the pivot grids. You also showed us how you can save one specific view for your pivot grid and then reload it. But is it actually possible to configure multiple views and maybe save them as specific pivot tables, maybe a weekly view, a monthly view, a quarterly view, with different values and different ways on how to calculate the end results?
Sure, that is perfectly possible. Let me just load a pivot grid again on screen. So what you could do, let us just do an example maybe. I would not want to see my actuals and my capacity. I just want to see my loads and my variance like this. And then let's say we just want to see it per week and load the data. Okay, and probably I need to select, let's select first till 30. So we have a bit more to work with. So what we can do now is save this. I don't know how it is weekly, for example. And if I now go to the open section, you will see this is now saved. I could save a second one, and you could switch between the views like you wish. So if we go back to the jobs planner where I had another view, and I open this one here, you will see I already saved one here, which is loaded when the application is started. So you can, as the rest of the application and all the other grids and panels in the application, you can save multiple states, switch between those states, make them default for a certain user profile. So the whole flexibility of the application is also built into the pivot.
Okay, great. Now these pivot tables are actually just showing me the actual numbers. Can I also have them displayed or rendered maybe as percentages of or averages as from subtotals or versus specific totals, as I would normally do in Excel, for example?
Yes, that is perfectly possible. So if we look here, for example, I just added the actuals again on screen. If you click on this, you will see all the different types of calculations that you could add or could calculate here. So we have sums, loads, averages, counts, for example, min-max values, etc. So it basically has all the features you are used in of a pivot grid in Excel, for example.
Okay, great, Tom. Another question here on the pivot table, more from the reporting side, I assume. The question is, can I export data from my pivot? Maybe I want a snapshot on how it looks, or maybe I need to report to management, or maybe I even want to export to Excel and work further with my numbers there. I'll take this one myself, Tom. Yes, indeed. That is a standard functionality of the components that we are using. We haven't built the controls in the front end, but that is upcoming in one of the next releases. Yes, we can definitely do that. Moreover, not only on the pivot itself, but we'll be adding that functionality also to the plan board, to the Gantt chart to make export function in Excel or as a PDF in various ways. Okay. There's no further questions I can see at this moment. Gentlemen, ladies, the questions box is still open. If you do have any questions, please submit them now. Also feel free to shoot us an email personally if you want to, or if you want a more in-depth discussion on a specific feature that you've seen. Okay, no more reactions for now. Well, perfect. And that makes us also perfectly in time as scheduled. That's what we do. We like to schedule it and keep to the plan. Well, thank you all for attending. We do hope that you liked what you saw today and that you will actually also implement these new features so your customers have more value out of the investment that they've made. Maybe also had some gaps before with some deals that you may not be able to close with the previous solution. We do hope that now you have all the features that you need. Well, with that, I will wish you a great day and a fantastic weekend ahead. We'll be sending an email soon with a recording link to this session. Cheers. Bye all.